Are you having a hard time figuring out what to get Dad for Father's Day? Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1 and save 15% off your order when you check out Row 1 Brand's Vintage Sports Pictorium Gallery. They have America's best sports art. With over 7,200 historic sports prints, you're assured to find something unique for Dad this Father's Day. If he's an NFL buff, check out the 1963 vintage NFL helmet poster. Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1.
Legend, quite the nickname. And on this, the debut episode of Sports Forgotten Heroes, we're going to look back on the career of the man who still goes by the nickname Legend, Billy Cannon. The Heisman Trophy winning halfback from LSU, an AFL star for the Houston Oilers and Oakland Raiders. And while he might be a forgotten hero to many of us, in Baton Rouge, when you say legend, there's only one, Billy Cannon.
This is Sports Forgotten Heroes, a tribute to the stars who shaped the games we love to watch and the games we love to play. Stars who provided us with many thrills, but when their time was up, they faded away. We'll take a look back at their spectacular careers, their moments of fame, even if it was just for one season or just one game. And now, here's your host, Warren Rogan.
Joining me today on Sports Forgotten Heroes will be Charles DeGravel, author of Billy Cannon, A Long, Long Run. It's a terrific biography on the life of Billy Cannon. And Jim Weathersby from the sportshistorian.com. Jim is an expert on SEC football and more. Not only will we take a look back at the all-pro career of Billy Cannon, we'll also look back at how his pre-college days shaped who he would become on and off the field, his life after his playing days were over, and how someone who had so much fell so hard and rebounded to once again become a pillar of his community. The story of Billy Cannon has so many twists and turns, I've split the podcast into two parts, and today we'll focus through his playing days at LSU, while part two will concentrate on his life as a professional football player and his life afterwards. You know, many authors asked Cannon if they could write his biography. He said no to all of them. In fact, Frank DeFord wrote a movie called Everyone's All-American starring Dennis Quaid and Jessica Lange. Many think it is loosely based on Cannon's life. This fictional story came about because, as the story goes, Cannon also turned down Frank DeFord. The person he did not turn down was Charles DeGravel, who was given all access to Billy Cannon. And as I mentioned earlier, he wrote a terrific biography called Billy Cannon, A Long, Long Run. And he's up first on this edition of Sports Forgotten Heroes. Here now, Billy Cannon, Part 1. Charles, welcome to Sports Forgotten Heroes.
It's good to be with you, Warren.
Thank you so much. So why did Billy Cannon agree to let you write his story?
It was one unlikely part of a lot of unlikely pieces of the story. I have been a prison minister at Angola Prison for over 25 years and have been a professional writer for many years as well. But I didn't meet Billy in the context of a writer. I met him first just because he's a dentist at a prison, and we just happened to cross paths. Well, when someone finally prevailed on him to tell his story, and as you mentioned, he repeatedly turned notable writers down. He came to me and asked me if I would tell the story, and I think it really was a matter of trust. I didn't know him well at that point, but he knew that it was going to be hard to shock me, and there are some things in the story that were difficult, I think, for him to talk about. But
Sure.
As we got to be friends, and as we built up a relationship of trust, he was willing to broach those subjects.
In all that time you spent with him, what surprised you most?
Well, as I said, I'd only met him and knew him the way that most people know him, and that is that he was a great football star. I was surprised, first of all, by how very smart he is, mm-hmm. and secondly, by what an amazing sense of humor he has. And so we spent many hours, and lots of those hours for me were spent laughing at his one-liners. Just a very bright, intelligent man, good-hearted man, who was also had a very adventurous spirit and was willing to go off the beaten track in some different ways. But I didn't know he was going to be so smart and funny.
Where do you think Billy's athletic talent came from? How did he develop that talent?
He had a father who was a natural athlete, and Billy's older brother, Harvey, was very athletic, played football, ran track, threw the discus. They were naturals. And once Billy took that natural ability and put on the muscle, he just left the ordinarily good ranks and went into the extraordinarily good ranks. So he was just a natural athlete that came along at the right time when weightlifting was just at its inception in football. Before that, the common knowledge was, the common wisdom was that weights were not good for athletes other than bodybuilders because they slowed you down and they tightened you up. It turned out not to be true, and Billy was right on the cusp of that weightlifting thing. And so when they got their first set of weights at Estruma High School and spent the summer working out, they came out that next year and just beat everybody hands down.
And he enjoyed weightlifting.
Yeah, he did, and he enjoyed weightlifting throughout his high school, college, and professional career. And of course, by the time after 11 years in the pros, by that time, weightlifting was a normal part of football at any level.
You know, I guess it all started in high school, where he led Estruma High to the state championship in 1955. And it was quite the year. He scored 39 touchdowns, set the state record with 229 points while playing running back, safety, and he also returned kicks. Billy also played baseball, basketball, and was a great sprinter too. In fact, he set the state record in the 100-yard dash, 9.6 seconds, and he also set the state record in the shot put by tossing it over 56 feet. But those numbers are only part of the story. He flat out dominated. Tell us about his high school career and maybe how repeating the 8th grade actually played such a crucial role in his development as a student and as an athlete.
Well, at one point, he was a remarkable athlete, and he didn't really turn the corner as an athlete until his junior year, the summer of his junior year. He put on some needed bulk, and he became what one sports writer called either the fastest shot putter in the world or the strongest sprinter, one of the two, or both. But he was a remarkable athlete, and he was a high school All-American, and when he went to the All-American game in Tennessee that year, his senior year, he was the most valuable player. So he was arguably the best running back and football player, really, because in those days they played defense and offense together, and he was a fabulous defensive back. So he was just a great athlete. But, he was very much of a rebel in spirit. One time I called him sort of a James Dean type, and he said, James Dean in a slow car. He grew up poor, and during his 8th grade year, he decided he wanted to hang around with a friend and drive motorcycles and not go to school, and he had to make up that year. And but of course, with his intelligence and sort of a renewed sense of purpose, going back to school, he did it and was an outstanding student.
You said he had that James Dean type personality, I guess, or he was a little adventurous, and it sort of got him a little into trouble a little bit with the law, wouldn't you say?
Oh, very much so. He was again the summer before his senior year. He was no way to kind of just beat around the bush. He and a bunch of friends were mugging people, essentially. They were waiting for men who were coming out of houses of prostitution and robbing them. These men were in a compromising position, and in most of the cases, they were willing to give up their money and their valuables to this group of kids without a fight. But if it came to it, Billy and his friends would beat him up. He was not a good guy. But a very complicated person. He was also very popular at school. The girls loved him. He was big, handsome, strong, and he could also be the most charming guy in the world. But when he looks back at those periods of his life where he was going in the wrong direction, he feels terrible about them. Wishes he could undo them. But it's just there's a dark streak in his personality.
How did he change? What prompted him to take the straight path, let's say?
Well, it's a funny thing, Warren. Even as a grown man, he was tempted off of the straight and narrow. He had been raised by church-going folks. His dad and mom were both strict disciplinarians. He turned out to be a great student, both in high school and college. And yet, when he got into financial trouble after his pro career was done, and he was, had a lucrative career as an orthodontist, but he had overextended himself in real estate. And once more, he was tempted to break the law, and he gave into that temptation. And Billy Cannon doesn't do anything in a small way. He ended up counterfeiting $6 million in $100 bills. And wow. At the time, it was perhaps the greatest counterfeiting scheme up until that time. And the Secret Service caught up with him. And characteristic of Billy Cannon, he was immediately repentant. He's cooperated with the Secret Service. He did his time without whining about it. And he came back and really had to struggle to rebuild a career.
So his high school career, we're going to get back to what happened after his football career, but his high school career was certainly stellar. Like you said, he was an All-American, and as one would expect, he caught the eyes of several colleges. He was recruited by LSU, Florida, Ole Miss, Alabama, Texas. But the one guy whom he wanted to play for, at least the one guy who he had hoped would recruit him, was Bear Bryant. But that never happened. Why?
Well, Bear never sent him a letter, and Billy believes that it was because of his reputation, that certain coaches, Billy, says were both courting him and bad-mouthing him at the same time. And he really would have loved to play for Bear Bryant, and he just didn't get the chance. He believes that his bad reputation ruined his chances with the Bear.
In fact, Billy was recruited by all the best schools, and he came very close to signing with Florida. But in the end, much to the delight of his mother, he decided to stay home and sign with LSU. And joining me now to talk about Billy's early days at LSU is Jim Weathersby from thesportshistorian.com. Jim, welcome to Sports Forgotten Heroes.
Well, glad to be here, Warren. I think it's going to be an exciting time. Looking forward to it.
His career at LSU was the stuff of legend. First, he led the freshman team to a 3-0 record, and with the varsity squad not being so competitive when Billy first arrived, the LSU coaching staff really took notice of that freshman squad, and they worked a lot with them. How unusual was it? How unusual was it for a coaching staff, a varsity coaching staff, to work with a freshman team? And how long was it before the coaching staff realized it really had something special in Billy Cannon?
Yeah, back then the NCAA designated that the freshmen couldn't play on the varsity team. And Paul Dietzel, the head coach of LSU at the time, was under a lot of pressure to produce a winner. He had had 3 basically lackluster seasons, and he went out and signed about 42, I think, freshmen, including Billy Cannon, for that freshman team. And see, he had a lot of star-studded players, and he knew they were going to be good. And the varsity team got off to an 0-3 start, and the freshman team had just beaten the Ole Miss freshman team 44-20, led by Billy Cannon. And so the coaches decided the Monday after they lost to Georgia Tech, that was their third loss of the season, that they were going to start to coach the freshman team, which was highly unusual because the freshman team was led by an assistant coach and some younger, maybe graduate assistants. And so it was highly unusual for the varsity coaching staff to do anything with the freshmen during the regular season. But Dietzel knew that this is where his bread and butter was going to be over the next couple of years. They had guys like Billy Cannon and Warren Rabb and Johnny Robinson and Don Purvis, all great players from the Baton Rouge, Louisiana area, and Purvis was from nearby Crystal Lakes, Mississippi. So he knew they had the talent, and they wanted to start working with them as soon as possible to get them into the system that they were going to be running once they got into the varsity the next season. And we can talk about what happened for the 57 season and beyond. But it basically, to answer your question, it was highly unusual for the varsity coaching staff to be working with the freshmen. And he knew right off the bat that Cannon was basically a young stud. That the guy had unbelievable speed. He could cut on a dime, and he was extremely powerful and strong as for a freshman. I mean, Dietzel knew, and the coaching staff knew early on that Cannon was going to be something special.
Before we get totally immersed in Cannon's career on the field at LSU, now would be a great time to explore what Cannon was like off the field at LSU, and the fact that Cannon got married during his freshman year. Once again, here's DeGravel.
He met his wife in high school. They were friends, and she was an outstanding athlete in her own right. She was a two-time All-State basketball player, and she was also very witty and had a lot of spunk and energy, kind of like Billy, and she helped him through his typing class. He was good at everything but typing, and his wife Dorothy, whom he calls Dot, helped him through that. They got married their freshman year at LSU, and so he lived only a short time in the dorms. After their marriage, he had an off-campus site and was paid some kind of allowance, which they did for married students in those days. So he didn't do a lot of sort of gallivanting with his teammates, but he was known for selling tickets to the ball game, and he wasn't really scalping the tickets, but he was getting them at a premium price and then selling them for their face value before the games. He did this throughout high school for college games and high school games, and that was pocket change for Billy. And always was a hustler. And when he started doing this, when he got to LSU as a freshman, they called him in and said, "You can't do this anymore. You're a star player. We can't have you out selling tickets before the football games." But he was very much of a family man. They continued to have children throughout the years. Ended up with 5 kids, and very much of a social guy. His teammate, he was always very deferential to his teammates and gave them lots of credit. And they were a great team.
Do you think that the fact that he met his wife in high school, got married soon after entering college, that actually helped him a lot because he could have gone in another direction?
That's a very good question, Warren, and I'm thinking through it as we talk. I think it would keep a guy like Billy, who has a tendency to wander off the beaten track. It might keep him more focused, and he loved his family, and next to football, that was his primary responsibility and concern. And Dot was there at every football game throughout his professional career as well. And his mom and dad, Billy's mom and dad, were at every game that they could make, almost regardless of where it was played.
So, off the field, things were going pretty well. Billy and Dot were happily married, And Coach Dietzel helped many of his players get jobs during the summer. And as one might expect, after you take a look back at the entire Billy Cannon story, it shouldn't come as a surprise that one of Billy's jobs actually had him involved, from a distance, with a very interesting character.
Yeah, that's another piece of this just fascinating story is that one of Billy's jobs in college was to work with the local boss of the AFL-CIO, a guy named Edward Grady Parton. And Billy, because his dad was a blue-collar worker, just had a natural sympathy for the unions. And working for Parton a couple of summers in a row, he really became a union man and a union sympathizer. And of course, Edward Grady Parton's boss was Jimmy Hoffa, a notorious, and the AFL-CIO itself was just really shady bunch of folks that were doing all kind of bad stuff. And both Parton and Hoffa served time, and of course Hoffa disappeared, and we still don't know where he is. So another sort of element of Billy's life that's off the beaten path.
Back on the field, freshman year in the rearview mirror, Billy Cannon and LSU were about to embark on an incredible 3-year run, and the stage for it all was set during a 5-5 season in 1957. Here's Jim Weathersby.
Yeah, 57, these young studs became sophomores and they were eligible to play for the first time on the varsity. And the record, as you said, wasn't all that great. They were 5-5, but the 5 losses were fairly close. I think the worst loss, they lost by 8 points to Florida. But they went 5-5, and they beat Alabama 28-0. This was the year before Paul Bryant came from Texas A&M to start coaching at Alabama. So Alabama wasn't all that good, but still 5-5. It was a marked improvement over the last 4 or 5 years. So things were looking up, and Billy was a key part of that as a halfback and gaining yardage and kickoff returns, punt returns. And he also played a little defensive back and linebacker. So these guys are starting to make their name. And, Jimmy Taylor was still on that team. And, he would go on to great things at the Green Bay Packers to become a Pro Football Hall of Famer. But it was Billy and Warren Robb and some of these other guys, Johnny Robinson, who really got the ball rolling. And they set the foundation in that sophomore 57 season.
And 1958 is really when Billy Cannon exploded on the scene and became a national name. He led the Tigers to a national championship that year as well. What stands out to you about that 1958 season and Billy Cannon's contribution?
Yeah, that was a magical year. And basically Dietzel and the staff set the tone early in 58, right around spring practice, when they decided to implement something called the wing T formation. And basically, to give you a visual, the wing T would have a halfback and fullback behind the quarterback, and another halfback that would launch himself behind one of the ends. What this did was allow for more passing, for reverses, for counters, for a lot of speed and trickery that basically LSU had. They had some great running backs, a bevy of running backs. They lost some offensive linemen off the 57 team, and SEC prognosticators thought LSU would finish no better than maybe midway in the SEC. But they were lifting weights as a team, and again, that was unusual for that time period. And Billy was a key part of the season. So they started out, interestingly enough, against Rice in Houston, with Alabama coming up next in Mobile. And Dietzel decided not to really use that wing T formation in the Rice game because he knew they could beat them without him. And Paul Bryant was scouting the game, and they knew that they probably didn't want to show the bear too much going into the Alabama game. So they ended up taking care of Rice, and they played Alabama and Mobile. And the first half of the game, Billy was a little upset because they still really haven't used the wing T to that point. And Alabama took a 3-0 halftime lead. Well, the beginning of the second half, Dietzel decided to unveil that wing T, and LSU came roaring back for a 13-3 victory, and Billy was part of that. He scored a touchdown. And Paul Bryant was seen on the sidelines demanding of his assistants as to why in the world they didn't know what LSU was running at the time, that wing tee. So the season wore on, and each game, Billy was either scoring a touchdown via running or returning punts or kickoffs for touchdowns, making good plays defensively. And the young Tigers started to grow up pretty quickly, and each game they got better and better and better.
Was it the 58 season where Dietzel basically had 3 different offenses?
Yeah.
Cannon could have had even a bigger season had he been the quote-unquote featured back.
That's right. There was an NCAA rule at the time that said that you couldn't insert a player more than 2 times in one quarter. And apparently the advocacy behind the rule was to force teams to have players play both offense and defense. Well, Dietzel came up with a plan that to rest these players and to not run afoul of the rule, to implement 3 platoons. And his first one was the white team that basically comprised of the first teamers, and Billy was, of course, first team halfback and also played defensive back on defense. Then he had a second group called, it started out as the goal team, but the sports writer called it the go team, and that stuck. And that was basically the second string offense. And then he had something called the Chinese Bandits that was the third team. The second team defense. And so what happened was during the game, the white team would start out the quarter, and then midway through, based on the circumstances, Dietzel would implement either the go team or the Chinese Bandit team, and then bring back the white team at the end of the quarter. Well, what this did was allow for depth. It kept the players fresh. It also kept them during the season committed to learning the game plans, and kept team morale high because everyone knew they were going to play. Well, this ended up being a brilliant strategy for Dietzel, because basically the LSU would wear opponents down as the season wore on, and you're right. Cannon amassed some excellent statistics over the season, but obviously, if he had played more, he would have had more yardage, more touchdowns, and everything else. So yes, you're right. That platoon system, 3 platoon system that Dietzel implemented did kind of keep Cannon's numbers down, but it was a great 58 season, and they took care of, like I said, Alabama. They knocked off Hardin Simmons, which was coached by Sammy Baugh, who, the famous quarterback from TCU and the Washington Redskins.
Yep.
And they went on to play Miami down in Miami, and they weren't really, LSU was just starting to make their way up the polls. The AP and the UPI polls were the big polls at that time. And they drubbed Miami 41-0. It was Miami's worst loss in 15 years. And LSU at that point had moved up to number 9 in the polls in both the AP and UPI. The following week, they routed Kentucky 32-7. LSU moved up the polls again. They were number 5 in the UPI, number 3 in the AP. And then the 6th game was against Florida, who had an excellent program there, and LSU hadn't beaten them in a few years. So Billy scored from 1 yard out, and LSU hung on to beat Florida 10-7. After that game, the AP put LSU at number 1, and the UPI still had them number 5. Finally, in Game 7, they met their big rival, University of Mississippi, or Ole Miss Rebels, coached by College Hall of Football famer Johnny Vaught. And it was a hell-bent game, but both fan bases were telling the other to go to hell, and Ole Miss had actually hired an airplane to drop leaflets onto the LSU campus that basically read, "Go to hell, LSU." So it was a little testy, but Billy played well, and he didn't do a whole lot offensively, but he made a huge play on Charlie Flowers, who was a Ole Miss star at the time, on a 4th down run at the LSU 1 yard line to keep Ole Miss from scoring. LSU was able to tack on a couple of touchdowns and won the game 14-0, which was a huge win. And that caught the attention of the pollsters. And so Ole Miss at the time was number 6. After that game, LSU was number 1 in both polls. They went on in the 8th game, routed Duke 50-18, and closed out the season playing Mississippi State in Jackson in a monsoon rainstorm that LSU hung on 7-6. Poor Billy Cannon at that point had one of his worst games that year. He fumbled a couple of times, but he did help LSU win by knocking a potential touchdown pass down in the end zone that would have given Mississippi State the lead. So LSU was 9-0 going into their final regular season game against their rival Tulane, and LSU decimated the Green Wave in that last game, 62-0. After that, they earned a Sugar Bowl invitation against an unranked 8-2 Clemson team. I don't know how Clemson got that invitation, but LSU ended up winning the game 7-0, and Billy Cannon was responsible for the victory. As a halfback, he threw a halfback pass to Mickey Mangum for the only score of the game, and LSU won, like I said, 7-0. And both the UPI and the AP anointed the Tigers the number 1 team in the land. So 1958 for the LSU program for Billy Cannon and all his Tiger buddies.
So he really set himself up on the national stage in 58.
He did. And I was going to tell you some of his accolades that year. He was first-team All-American, Player of the Year by the UPI, the Sporting News, and the Touchdown Club of Columbus. He was All-SEC. He was voted SEC MVP by the Nashville Banner. He led the SEC in rushing yards, average, and TDs. He finished third in Heisman voting that year behind Pete Dawkins of Army, who won it, and Randy Duncan of Iowa, who finished second. So, yes, Cannon had vaulted himself into the national spotlight with the way he helped the LSU team win the national championship.
To some, his nickname was Legend. And in 59, I think, is probably where he really solidified that nickname. LSU didn't repeat as national champions, but that was the year that Billy Cannon won the Heisman Trophy. He led the team in rushing, scoring, and against Ole Miss on Halloween night, he scored a touchdown on one of the greatest returns, punt returns, in the history of LSU. Was the 59 season a success, or was it a disappointment? Tell me about 59 and obviously the season that Billy Cannon had.
Well, LSU's coming off the national championship year of 58, so the targets were on their backs. Paul Dietzel decided to be conservative for that season. And Billy put it, once they got up 2 touchdowns on anybody, Dietzel just shut the team down. They didn't run a lot of the wing tee like they did the previous season, but they were winning. They won. They started out 6-0. They outscored their opponents 103-6. So they were dominating. And then they ran up. Yeah, they were still winning, even though they were playing conservative football. And so, things were going along swimmingly. And then Game 7 came up, and that was on Halloween in Tiger Stadium at night. And they were playing again. Their arch rival at the time, the Ole Miss Rebels. And Ole Miss had another great team and actually had a lead in that game 3-0 into the fourth quarter. Well, interestingly, Paul Dietzel had a rule with all of his kick returners that if a ball was kicked inside the 15-yard line, the rule was to let it go, let it bounce in the end zone and get the ball out on the 20 at the time. Well, Billy, always a winner, always determined to find a way to win, fielded a punt, and it was on the 11-yard line, and he proceeded to break 7 tackles and go down the field for an 89-yard touchdown that gave LSU the 7-3 lead. And that's when his nickname, I think, the Legend, came about. Well, what people don't remember, or a lot of people don't remember about that game, is that Billy basically saved the game. Ole Miss had enough time to take the ball down the field, and they got down to the 2-yard line, and LSU stopped them 3 times, and Billy and Warren Rab, made the stop, and the Ole Miss quarterback, Doug Elmore, on 4th and 1 with 18 seconds left that sealed a victory for Ole Miss. For LSU. So Billy's, electrifying run and his defensive gem, saved the day for the Tigers. And So they were 7-0, and on their way potentially to back-to-back national championships. Well, the next week they had to go to Knoxville, Tennessee, to play the University of Tennessee Volunteers. And Billy said they'd had a great week of practice. They were ready to play. It was a perfect day. It was a little chilly, but a good day for football. And LSU jumped out to 7-0 lead. They carried into the third quarter, and then Rabb threw a pick six, and Tennessee tied the game up. And 2 minutes later, Tennessee scored again to go up 14-7. Well, luckily for LSU, Tennessee had a horrendous fumble at their own 2-yard line in the fourth quarter. And LSU recovered and scored a touchdown to pull within 14-13. So Dietzel immediately ran Billy in to try to convert the 2 points for the lead and possibly the win. And as he put it, everybody in the stadium, whether they understood football or not, knew it was going to be off tackle to the right side. And that was the play. Billy ran it, and he drove hard, and the referee said that the Tennessee team stopped Cannon short of the goal line, but Cannon still today will swear to you that he scored, and that would have given LSU the lead and possibly the win. But as it turned out, Tennessee won the game 14-13, and that was LSU's first loss in 2 years. And basically the air kind of went out of the balloon at that point. They finished the season beating Mississippi State and Tulane, and the Sugar Bowl came back and invited them to play Ole Miss, kind of a return match. And the players just didn't want to play Ole Miss. They wanted to go to another bowl, but there was no other invitation. And basically the LSU administration strong-armed the team to play Ole Miss in that bowl game. And Ole Miss got a measure of revenge, winning 21-0. And later on in his book, Paul Dietzel said he regrets the team playing Ole Miss in that game, knowing that they really, mentally just weren't ready to play, and they lost the game. But again, Billy had a hell of a year, and he won the Heisman in '59, as you said, and I'm sure some of that had to do with that '58 season. But he was everything again in '59 that he was in '58. I mean, he was All-American again. He SEC Player of the Year again, led the league in a lot of different statistics. I think if you asked Billy Cannon, he would say that the year was not successful. That they didn't win. They had their standards, at a high level. They wanted to win another national championship, but they didn't. 9-2 record is not bad, but they had loftier goals, and so they didn't win the national championship. So from Billy's standpoint, I think he would state that it was not a successful season. Even though, boy, he won all kinds of awards, including the Heisman, as I said, and the Walter Camp Memorial Trophy as the College Football Player of the Year. He ended the year in the Sugar Bowl, and that was the end of his career at LSU. But he wasn't finished playing football.
Nah, he wasn't done by a long shot. And while LSU fell short of its goal of repeating as national champions, Cannon enjoyed a spectacular season. He rushed for 598 yards and scored 6 touchdowns. He won the Heisman Trophy despite the fact that LSU did not repeat as national champions. And as one would expect, Cannon was the guy every team in pro football wanted, and with a new league starting up, the American Football League, there was going to be a bidding war. Next time on Sports Forgotten Heroes, we're going to look back at the controversy surrounding Billy Cannon's entree into professional football, his all-pro career, and his remarkable fall from grace and his rise afterwards. I want to thank my guests today, Charles DeGravelle and Jim Weathersby, and they'll be joining me again on our next podcast, Part 2 of Billy Cannon. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. To learn how you can be a part of Sports Forgotten Heroes, please visit patreon.com/sportsfh. That's patreon.com/sportsfh. You can even find out how to ask a question in a future podcast. Again, that's patreon.com/sportsfh. You can also find out more about Sports Forgotten Heroes at sportsfh.com and follow Sports Forgotten Heroes on Twitter at sportsfheroes. And you can also follow Sports Forgotten Heroes on Facebook as well. Finally, thank you to the podcast crew at Hungry Cliff for all of their support. Tony Solanskis and his crew does a terrific job. Check them out at hungrycliff.com. Thanks again, and see you next time on Sports Forgotten Heroes.
We here at the Sports History Network proudly partner with 26 podcasts, all revolving around the history of sports. But did you know that many of our hosts were sports history authors way before they started their shows? It's true. We've got Joe Ziemba, host of When Football Was Football, Joe Zagurski, host of Pro Football in the 1970s, Mark Morthier, host of Yesterday Sports, Tommy Phillips, host of Lombardi Memories, and Scott Adamson, co-host of From the 55-Yard Line. All these authors have many books for you to choose from. To check them out, go to our website at sportshistorynetwork.com/sportshistorybooks. Pick up your copy today. Soundtrack provided by Kevin MacLeod of filmmusic.io.